Welcome to 5 Minutes with Mrs. Hernandez. I'm Mrs. Hernandez, and we are going to talk about two different things today. We're going to talk about converting fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions, so converting. And not only are we going to talk about converting, we're going to be reminded about finding common denominators. So we're going to talk about converting, and we're going to talk about common denominators. Common denominators are something that you should have learned in 3rd grade, but this is more of a refresher. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's talk about converting. There are two types of converting we're going to talk about today. We're going to go from fractions to decimals and from decimals to fractions. Let's jump right in. In order to convert a fraction to a decimal, something such as 1/4, we simply have to divide the bottom into the top. Remember, I've always talked about how fractions are just division problems. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to divide 4 into 1. And don't forget, from our division unit, we have to add a 0.00 at the end in order to make it divisible. 4 divides into 10 2 times, because 2 times 4 equals 8. And when we subtract that, the difference is 2. We're going to go ahead and bring down the 0. And 4 divides into 20 5 times. 5 times 4 is 20. So now we're left with no remainder. Don't forget to add your decimal. So this fraction, 1/4, is the same as this decimal, 0.25. This is what we call equivalent or equal. Well, how do you go backwards? What if I had the decimal 0.50? How could I make that into a fraction? Well, this is really easy. After the decimal, I count 2 decimal places, which is hundredths. So in my fraction, I have to draw 2 zeros because we went to 2 decimal places. So this is what we call the hundredths. And now I simply put my number up on top. Not 0.50, but just 50. A good rule of thumb is that once you get this fraction, you could always simplify it by finding the GCF. In this case, our GCF is 50. So if I simplify this, 50 goes into 50 one time, 50 goes into 100 2 times. So this decimal, 0.50, is the same as 1/2, or is also equivalent to 50/100. These are all equal to each other. Let's talk about common denominators. Common denominators can often be found between 2 numbers by simply trying to make the smaller denominator the same as the bigger denominator. In this case, let's ask ourselves, can we multiply anything by 5 to get 10? Well, of course, 5 times 2 gives me 10. And if I multiply the bottom times 2, I also have to do the same thing to the top. So in this case, my new fraction is 8/10. Now you can see they both have common denominators, which is a 10. And we could easily order these. We could say 7/10 is smaller than 8/10. So we could make it an inequality where we say 7/10 is smaller than 8/10. Or we could order them. We could say 7/10 is the least, then 8/10 goes next. Thank you for sticking around with 5 Minutes with Mrs. Hernandez.